Going to bring into the conversation, though, now our friend, political analyst Brian Sobel, who's been kind of helping us make sense of all of this. He joins me. Brian, good to see you. You and I spoke just this very time last night. I guess everyone's talking about the fact that the race was called the minutes polls closed. Were you surprised by that or no?
No, the modern technology, less than 1% of the vote in, they're already working the algorithms, and they know where the votes are by county, by precinct, and so they can pretty quickly these days come up with a pretty accurate final result very, very early in the race, and you can see it on the screen there.
You know, I guess, and I had asked you this yesterday, Brian, because South Carolina has an open primary format, and we'll just have to wait kind of for the breakdown, you know, how many Democrats voted for Haley, how many Republicans voted for Haley. That's something that I'm looking for. I think for, you know, maybe the average voter or viewer, that's not entirely as important. But for those politicos who watch this very closely, that data point, couldn't that be somewhat of a bellwether for November?
Absolutely. For data geeks, for people who play inside baseball with politics, definitely. How many Democrats sat out the Democrat primary in order to vote in this primary tonight, because it's an open primary state, will be an interesting breakdown. If it's a fairly large number, that portends something happening on the national level, which, by the way, dovetails and tracks with what Nikki Haley has talked about, which is that if she can garner independents and Democrats and Republicans, she can win this thing.
Okay, but Brian, after tonight, who's still giving money to the Haley campaign?
I think the money will continue to come in until March 5th. You have 15 states voting in American Samoa, and I think her die is cast, the final die is cast on Super Tuesday. If she is beaten in, you know, the vast majority of the states that are going to be in contention on Super Tuesday, I think she has to bow out and start looking towards 2028.
But Brian, is there a kernel of truth to what many in the Trump campaign have said that, and even at the RNC and politicos like yourself have said that the Trump campaign cannot fully commit to the general election until Nikki Haley is behind them? Is that true or not? I mean, many have already likened and characterized Donald Trump as the quote-unquote presumptive nominee. Or are there rules, protocols in place for the national party and they can't kind of tap into those just yet?
I don't think so, Andrew. I think because of the nature of the race, I think the Trump campaign is going to sail on. The Haley campaign after tonight has to take a hard look at where they need to apply their resources ahead of Super Tuesday. They need a lot of wins on Super Tuesday for her to say, I'll move on. Delegates are slipping away. Momentum is slipping away. And to regain the momentum, she has to do very well on Super Tuesday. That said, I think that, you know, from the Trump campaign point of view, the quicker Haley leaves and either throws her support behind Donald Trump or just remains silent, that's what they're looking for, certainly this evening, and if not this evening, then Tuesday.
Yeah, we have the delegate tracker up here at Live Now from Fox. Donald Trump or I guess Nikki Haley. You need 1,215 delegates to secure the nomination. That's the threshold. There's some 2,000 plus, though, at play. Trump now, after South Carolina, gets 107. Nikki Haley at 17. And then, of course, DeSantis and Ramaswamy there with their delegates. Of course, they have suspended their campaigns here. So the delegate math doesn't lie, does it, Brian?
No, it doesn't lie. As the numbers continue to roll into the Trump camp, it gets bleaker and bleaker for a pathway to victory for Nikki Haley. Again, you know, a week from Tuesday, Super Tuesday, is going to be the decider, and she has already said, I'm in here to at least Super Tuesday. And I know they're doing some media buys in some of the states for Tuesday. And so she has to hope that somehow this momentum shifts. And if you think about it a little bit, you know, South Carolina, yes, she was governor of South Carolina, but it's a very conservative state. A lot of Trump supporters there. The governor of South Carolina, both United States senators from South Carolina, the majority of the state legislature from South Carolina already pledged their support to Donald Trump. So she was fighting uphill in her own state almost from the beginning here.
Yeah, we have a live picture there in Charleston, South Carolina, as we await for Nikki Haley to make remarks there. Let's go back, though, to our delegate tracker. I'm being told, Brian, there were 50 pledged delegates in South Carolina. Already, Trump has 44 of those.
Yes.
It's interesting because the delegates are awarded somewhat funkily here in South Carolina. At-large delegates are awarded to the candidate with the most number of votes. You can see here, this is how delegates are awarded. So 29 are awarded to the winner. 21 are awarded to the remaining delegates as well, allocated according to 7 congressional districts. And those are awarded to the candidate with the most number of votes, and no write-ins or uncommitted on the ballot as well. So the top vote getter in each district will be awarded 3 delegates. So I think that's really interesting as well here.
It is, and I think it speaks to something that a lot of viewers who may follow politics understand, but the casual observer may not, and that is that every state has different rules. And so it's incumbent upon the campaigns and their people to understand the rules of each state, how the delegates are selected, when they're selected, whether they're bound delegates, whether they're bound delegates after only the first ballot. There's all kinds of rules. You need a big book to probably put them all together. But that's why these campaigns have experts in every state to try to sort all this stuff out.
Yeah. You know, and it's interesting, too. This is the first time South Carolina has tried its hand at the open primary format. Henry McMaster, the governor there, was quoted in an interview saying that he doesn't believe the state will go back to a closed primary. So I think that's kind of an interesting format and avenue going forward in some of these primary processes as well here. And when you have turnout, the turnout question is going to be key. Yes, South Carolina had early voting as well. Drew McKissick, he's the chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party. He was on Fox early this morning. He said this, so far 208,000 people have voted in our primary. He said that's 75,000 more than voted in the entire Democratic presidential primary, which was held on February the 3rd, some 3 Saturdays ago here. So I think that's really interesting as well here. So that means that, yes, Democrats did vote today, and a lot of them did.
Absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see that parse, to see whether people just held their votes to try to sway this away from Donald Trump towards Nikki Haley. And of course, the presidential year is always one that voters look to and want to be involved in. And so presidential turnout is always very high across the country, relatively speaking. And it'll be really, really critical for the Haley campaign to dissect how this went in South Carolina tonight, because this will become part of their message going forward. We were able to bring a lot of Democrats over, independents, because it has been her stated position all along that without having some Democrat support, some independent support, Donald Trump cannot be elected president of the United States in the general, even if he has his party's nomination. And so she's making that case very clearly. Yeah, and so this is where we can see whether that played out a little bit.
Yeah, I want to put up this tweet. The former president is getting kind of plaudits and accolades from many in a lot of Republican corners, including House Speaker Mike Johnson. Brian Johnson says this: "Congratulations to President Donald Trump on another decisive victory in South Carolina. With President Trump as our nominee, I am confident we will take back the White House, grow the majority, and restore our nation as the shining city on a hill." Now, Brian, you juxtapose that tweet right there with what Nikki Haley has been saying for the past 4 weeks, that if Trump is the nominee, not only will Trump lose the general election, but Republicans will lose the House and the Senate. She is citing past elections as evidence of that. It doesn't seem like that rhetorical point is resonating, does it? At least among Republican primary voters.
No, I think, as you and I have talked about over time, the people who want Donald Trump his base are very, very much in his camp and are not going to be swayed under any set of circumstances. Haley has been trying to make the case, I think, to a broader electorate. The problem is, like in South Carolina, you have to beat the Republican competition there to actually emerge. And so, on that point, it's clear that Donald Trump has had a big night in South Carolina.
You know, Brian, I think it's interesting. I have in front of me when some of these other primary challengers in primaries past dropped out, the dates that they dropped out. All right, I want to put this up here. So in 2020, remember, it was just the Democratic primary. Bernie Sanders, he was then candidate Joe Biden's main competitor. He dropped out April 8th of that year. But I think more interestingly is 2016 amongst Republicans, Brian. That year, Ted Cruz and John Kasich dropped out in early May. It is just late February here. So I think when you put those two together, that's really interesting, is it not?
It is. And if you go back into history and look at when people dropped out, as you have, along with making monumental decisions like Lyndon Baines Johnson deciding that he would not seek the presidency of the United States. These all come roughly February, March, April, because by summer, so many things are decided and the conventions are beginning. And in many ways, it's a done deal for both the leading candidate, but also the trailing candidates. And of course, everything also has to do with money, the number of people in the race. All of that comes to a head in the discussion. Here, among Republicans, I mean, you have Donald Trump and you have Nikki Haley. So everybody in the country knows who those two people are. And as Donald Trump continues to have success, whether people who are Democrats or independents or Democrat-leaning Republicans, you have to look at the performance of Donald Trump. And at some point, if Super Tuesday does not go reasonably well for Nikki Haley, it's a done deal.
Yeah, and if our viewers are just joining us right now, we are going to continue keeping this graphic up of the vote share. It looks like we have a little bit more of a percentage of votes accounted for and reported, about 28%. So that's what I had been telling viewers all along, Brian, of what I was looking for. How much can Nikki Haley, if at all, narrow the very, very large gap she had going into today with Donald Trump in the polling? It was like 2-1. It was 60-30. And so now with about 28%, 59-40 there. Is she doing that or not? Have you seen indications that she is narrowing this at all?
No, she's not. And also back to what we were talking about in terms of Democrats voting in the open primary for a Republican candidate. This also probably does not bode well for Nikki Haley, because Donald Trump, at this hour with these many votes in, nearly 30%, has obviously not only a commanding lead, but a predictable lead based on polling.
Yeah, and of course, we have her election night watch party. This is in Charleston, South Carolina. Brian, we're going to kind of keep you on here. We're going to wait and see whether or not Nikki Haley steps up. So we're going to keep talking politics. I know you got the time. I know you like talking politics. Brian, let's go back to some of these dates. Let's go back to 2012. Rick Santorum, he dropped out April 10th. Newt Gingrich dropped out May 2nd. Ron Paul dropped out May 14th. So I think that kind of just illustrates the point that in a Republican primary cycle, any primary, it is still early. It's only still early because there's only two candidates in this race. One of them has won each and every contest so far this year.
Fair point. And I think that's the point that Nikki Haley is trying to make. That is that it's early. Yes, lots of delegates in the early going have migrated to Donald Trump, but there's hundreds and hundreds of delegates yet to be selected. My contention is that if you have 15 more states voting a week from Tuesday, and Nikki Haley cannot pick up any wins and cannot do well in that, she's got a very tough decision to make. She can hang in, she could go all the way to the convention. But that requires money, and whether she wants to remain a voice in the Republican Party. And a lot of people think that what she is doing here is really setting the table for a run in 2028.
That's so interesting, too, because I want to bring up her future political prospects, if any, because she was on Special Report with Bret Baier on the Fox News channel, I believe yesterday, and she was straight up asked about any potential if, say, Trump were to tap her to be his running mate, would she be interested in that? And she categorically said no. She said she would not be interested in being anyone else's running mate. And then there was this talk as well about, Dean Phillips, who's still in this long shot bid on the Democratic side, mounting his own primary race, calling for a unity ticket, possibly between himself and Haley. She kind of categorically rejected that outright as well here. So it remains to be seen when and if Haley drops out of the race and what happens to her career when she does that.
She becomes a statesperson that will travel the country, discussing politics with people. She will continue to meet at a grassroots level with people in every state as she can. She'll continue to raise money. She will be the odds-on favorite at this very, very early date for a bid for the presidency at the conclusion of this next term of whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And so her job is to get out to as many states as she can, to meet as much and as many of the media and people in those states. And that's going to be her job, assuming that she has 28 on her mind. And, I think we believe she does. She was, very clear yesterday that she was not going to be Donald Trump's running mate. That was very clear. And frankly, I'm not sure Donald Trump would even consider her, even if he was pushed to do so. He is somebody who takes names, and he's not liking her name so much right now.
Yeah, and she's not liking his name so much right now. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I asked you this yesterday, Brian. The attacks from the Haley camp against the Trump camp have been really, really sustained, quite vociferous as of late. And I was just asking you, would that have been to her advantage if she had started doing that 6-7 months ago? Some have said that's too little too late. She's going after all of his legal issues, going after his character, going after some of the, alleged perceived coziness he has with dictators around the world. That's a line she says all the time. It's kind of falling flat, and that's evidence tonight now in South Carolina. Republican primary voters there didn't catch on to some of that rhetoric.
Right. And she may have started that sort of discussion weeks and weeks ago. I think a lot of it would have been lost because there were a number of Republicans in the race. And I think they were all sort of circling Trump, but not attacking Trump directly, other than calling on him to debate, which he, of course, didn't. And she's making points about, say, Vladimir Putin and Xi of China and these these other dictators around the world that I think are legitimate. But for Trump supporters, they're not buying it, and they just think that their candidate has this all under control. And so that's tough to break through if you're Nikki Haley. And up until, as I say, Super Tuesday, she's got to keep hammering those themes.
Yeah, I just was given some interesting data. Haley is leading in 4 counties, Brian, as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting. And many of them are kind of these metropolitan centers in the state. Richland County, that's Charleston. Charleston County as well. Or Richland County, I'm sorry, that's Columbia. McCormick County, Beaufort County. So it seems like these population centers, which historically are well-educated, urban, Richland County, that's Columbia, Charleston County, that's Charleston. She's leading there as we speak right now. I'm not saying we'll have to wait for the data and the numbers to come in, but that could change when all is said and done. But that's how these things go. That's how these things track. That's how she has been with some of the other contests in some of these metropolitan centers.
Absolutely, and it includes a mix of perhaps these Democrats who held out to vote in the Republican primary, which would dovetail with her theme that you need everybody to get elected if you're the Republican candidate. That's Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. She may be able to come out of tonight with a little bit of a case that, hey, based on the demography of the 3 or 4 places, areas that she wins, cities, that this is exactly what she's been saying, that this is the microcosm of the bigger issue. And that is, if you can't bring different folks along, different party, independents, you're not going to win the general election. And that's really been her theme. And it's actually a smart way to approach it, because otherwise, Donald Trump supporters just say, well, we've already got our candidate. We're moving on.
Right. Brian, stay with us. We're going to keep you here, talk to you here till the bottom of the hour. We'll see whether or not Nikki Haley steps up there to her election night watch party and addresses her supporters. Let's take a quick commercial break. We'll see everyone in 2 minutes.